Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres, coming live from Barcelona, and coming live from somewhere else in Europe is my dear co-host, Efrain Rosario. Hey, Efrain, how are you?
Hi, good to see you as always. I'm calling in today from Paris.
Nice. What's the weather like?
It's a bit, quite honestly, it's not too bad. It's sunny and it's not raining. It's a bit windy, but we'll take it.
Kind of pre-summer here in Barcelona, but still like nice spring. Let's see. Next week we're gonna see each other skin and bone here in Barcelona for Shop Talk Europe.
And I hope you've arranged it so that we have nice weather. We're all anticipating nice weather for Shop Talk.
It's not raining, I think. So let's hope it's not too hot. As long as it's this type of temperature, we'll all be very happy. By the time this airs, it will be after Shop Talk Europe. So hopefully you'll all have seen some very good pictures of Efrain and me and our guests today having a lot of fun and networking, and not bored or making a fool of ourselves, even worse.
We're wet.
Or wet, exactly. By the way, Efrain, I was looking at the numbers, and I don't know if you've seen that we've recently reached 23,000 LinkedIn followers. Not too bad.
I had. It's a cause for celebration.
Indeed,
Yeah,
yeah. Sorry,
I was just gonna say. I mean, it's just we're very blessed to have people who follow us, and thanks to everybody who does that. And tell a friend.
As they would have said 10 years ago, #blessed.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because it's on audio, but I'm making the heart
symbol. Now you would make the Korean one, like with the two fingers like this.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I'm dating myself. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I wanted to give a shout out to our sister podcast in the US, the CPG Guys, who I'm going to be seeing in Cannes very soon. And they're about to reach 500 episodes. We're still at 240. So congrats to them in advance. Maybe by the time this airs, they will have reached, I don't know what number they're at now. But anyway, let's go into our episode today because we're very excited about this one, because we're accompanied by one of the rising stars in FMCG today. It's no other than Nicole Pilkington, who's the global head of eCommerce acceleration at Barilla. Hey, Nicole.
Hi, thanks for having me, Daniel and Efrain.
Good to see you. And excited to celebrate our 1 year anniversary since we met last year at Shop Talk, this time in Barcelona again.
Yeah, very, very excited and looking forward to that.
What are you looking forward to from the event? What do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, this year we're bringing the majority of our global e-commerce team from around the world to the event. So for me, it's really important to continue with the networking with other brands, meeting the up and coming agencies and vendors we can partner with, but really take inspiration from, where we're at today as a brand and where we need to be in the next couple of years. And coming out of the event with lots of takeaways and action steps for each of us around the world.
Yeah, a big Barilla crew coming. And so when you've listened to this, if you've been at Shop Talk Europe and you haven't seen the Barilla crew, I don't know what you will have been doing during the event. So Nicole, you're now head of e-commerce acceleration at Barilla, but how did you end up in this role? Tell us a bit about your career background.
Yeah, of course. So I've always worked in e-commerce and I really found my passion there through kind of falling into my first role within the digital commerce world. And I've always been within the CPG space. And I think the reason for that is I very much enjoy the fact that no 2 days are the same. And within each of these roles that I've been in, it's always been in a support function, to some degree. And I think that's on a personal level, I really get a lot of energy from helping people and building relationships and connections. I started my career at Johnson & Johnson in their digital marketing team in the UK. And that enabled me to progress to a regional digital commerce capabilities role. And then about 5 years ago, I joined the global Barilla team, working very much in the sales function. So always been in e-commerce and have kind of sat on both sides of the fence from a marketing and sales, although I know we're talking about taking that fence down. But if you talk about, sitting on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just curious to get your perspective, having worked at what would appear to be obviously two companies within the CPG or FMCG space, but somewhat different with regards to how both their products, but also I'm just curious from a culture perspective, how has that been in terms of when you compare your time and your experiences at J&J versus what you've experienced so far at Barilla?
Yeah, the way I looked at it was when I joined Barilla, I very much tried to give myself 6 months of learning. So of course I knew and had experience within the e-commerce expertise, but I didn't have experience of the company. So it was quite different for me to move into a role where you don't perform for the first 6 months, but that was really helpful for me to get on my feet quickly and be able to perform once you know those company dynamics. So it was a change. I'm still within the same sector, but of course the way a company operates is very different. And I think that grace period of 6 months really just helped me absorb as much information as I can so that I could then, take the existing knowledge I had and apply that to my new role.
And just to clarify for myself, when you were at J&J, were you in a global role there as well? Or when you made the transition to Barilla, was that when you went from a local regional role to a global role? Because obviously that's also an interesting transition as well.
Yeah. So I was in a local UK role to begin with at J&J. I then moved to a regional, so EMEA e-commerce role just before I left. And then I transitioned to global. So I kind of made my way through the 3 different regions, as you would say.
Interesting. Also, and I'm curious to know, my background is in recruitment, and I had done roles like at the type of level that you joined at Barilla, or even a bit more senior, like let's call it senior manager, head, director level. And it's normally very difficult to recruit high potentials there because they still feel like they're, and as you were, being promoted rapidly in their company. What made you make the leap and switch companies when you were like highly rated, high potential in a company?
I think the role appealed. Interestingly, I've never worked in a job that someone else has had before.
Wow.
So I've always entered a role that is new. And I was speaking to a friend recently who took a new role like that and hated it. And it was quite a revelation to me because it's where I get my energy from. I think I prefer to not conform to a standard and create and shape that myself. So that appealed to me. But also, Guy, my boss, the hiring manager, you feel an energy when you interview for a role. And I saw his vision of what he wanted to turn the London acceleration team into. And I got excited at the possibility of being a part of that. But you're right, it is a change to move from a company where you have built those connections and trust. But I see now, for example, you still have those people who matter at other companies, but also at the company you work in. So a learning opportunity for me definitely pushed me in that direction.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, from a cultural perspective, how was that transition between J&J and Barilla? Because I would imagine that those two cultures, while they may share some commonalities, are probably different in a lot of interesting ways as well.
Yeah, it's been a learning experience and something that's definitely taken time. I would say I'm still learning today, a couple of years in around the company and the different nuances. But again, it's all around thinking about how adaptable you can be and asking the right questions as well. If you don't know the answer, kind of seeking that out and working with each of the local markets, particularly in my role. You work with lots of countries around the world. It's really important to take the time to get to know those teams.
So tell us a bit about your current role at Barilla. What does it mean to be the global head of e-commerce acceleration? Like, what are the top topics you're working on?
Yeah, so I really kind of focus on digital commerce measurement and capabilities. And for context, I sit within a tight unit of 5 of us in London who have formed the global digital commerce team. And we're here to support the 35 different markets around the world who work with e-commerce to some degree. So when I think about the measurement and capabilities, it's really thinking about building that community of individuals around the world who work in or support e-commerce. That's one of the things I've been kind of creating and nurturing over the past couple of years, and something that's really important to me. You know, you as a global function, you naturally hold expertise within the team, but it's really important to build connections to those individuals around the world who have their peers sat in different countries. So that's a real core focus of my role. And within the past couple of months, that's been looking at, you know, what's our 3-year strat plan for digital commerce in each of our markets? What does that mean from a budget? You know, what's the number we hit last year? What's the number we'll hit this year? And what does that look like in 3 years' time? And then interestingly thinking about things such as resourcing. So, you know, do we have the right people in our teams around the world? And if we increase our headcount, what does that look like? Even countries who are at a similar, you know, let's say net sales output, their team setup can be very different. So really thinking about how do we set ourselves up for success today as well as in the future. I've recently took on global Amazon responsibility, so getting stuck in with negotiation and support in the markets around the world who work with Amazon, which is really, really interesting. I haven't worked on Amazon for a couple of years now, so I'm getting back familiar with that. And then probably the thing or the topic that I'm most excited about is what we call omnichannel customer collaboration. So it's kind of your traditional category management, but for the digital world and sat within a global function. You get to change a very commercial conversation into a non-commercial opportunity, I would say, through providing category, shopper, and digital insights. So, you know, our local markets are regularly inviting us to join their retailer conversations and present to the retailer, you know, our digital expertise. And for me, you know, that just kind of demonstrates that level of trust we have developed over the past couple of years with our teams around the world. So kind of a combination of quite a few things today.
Quite a lot. I mean, that is a long job description, Nicole. I don't know. I think you'll have to write a book on time management and prayer. No? Efrain, what do you think?
No, I mean, you know, I always say that when you're in these global roles, you kind of wear 2 key hats. One is around leading key projects or partnering with markets on key projects, and the other one is capability building in terms of how you take those learnings and scale them across the system. So, yeah, there's a lot of things covered under those 2 big buckets. So, no, so you're usually you're never not busy. And it usually means you have to be very flexible in terms of like what hours of the day you work, because, you know, someone's always working at some point in the day with time zone differences. So I empathize. So I'm curious, Nicole, and you kind of touched on it a bit earlier when we talked about, you know, that you've kind of run the gamut, if you will, from local to regional to global now in your roles. And I'm curious to get your perspective now that you've kind of seen all 3 of those. When it comes to being in that global role and, you know, having to, in essence, play a strategic leadership role and from a planning perspective centrally, how do you work with the local markets in terms of them being able to take those global learnings and be able to deploy them at a local level?
When we look at the markets around the world, you know, every market is, of course, different, but I think there are similarities, certainly in the way people shop. So, you know, we can take our approach very much kind of, I would say, grounded in the way people behave and the way shoppers shop in the digital space. So we actually have a very, I would say, tight, locally coordinated approach that's facilitated by our global team for things such as e-commerce content, we'll create global masters, which can then be adapted into local languages. But, we want to remain in that consistency. And like I said, of the information the shoppers are looking for, making it really easy, clear and simple. So I would say it's a balancing act, kind of more weighted towards a coordinated local approach that's facilitated by the team in London. And when I look at the team, they were hired because they had specialist expertise that was difficult for us to hire in local markets. So our team comes from backgrounds such as Amazon agencies or beauty FMCGs or healthcare industry. And it's really important that we were able to bring that outside in, that we've struggled to hire from a local perspective for many years. So and we coupled those external hires with some internal hires as well, because as much as we want to inspire, we need to make sure that it's actionable and relevant. And having someone who's worked in a local market sit within a global function is honestly invaluable, particularly in those early days. They're the voice of the local market within the conversation without having to invite 20 people in.
Yeah. But tell me actually, how do you do it? Like, how do you get the markets to actually implement your initiatives? Or how does that dialogue actually work? Because a lot of times it is a bit of a power struggle.
For me and for our team, I would say we've taken a lot of time to build a connection with our local market. So, we took the time to understand their job, understand their challenges, and build those relationships and trust. And it certainly doesn't come without the effort. But you can see the rewards. Now we're in this kind of 4 to 5 year post-launch phase of our team. We're able to activate much more easily. Now we've developed that trust. And honestly, that took a lot of time visiting the different markets, running store visits, really getting to know their business, sitting with them in a room. I think we'd all agree sitting next to someone and having a conversation is always more productive than through a phone call or through Zoom. And of course, that can't happen all of the time. But for us, taking that time to build those connections with our local markets, that's what's enabled us, I think, to be successful in the initiatives we try to launch.
Does that normally mean in your case, actually visiting the local markets many times and getting to know them on the ground?
Yeah. So we spend, I would say maybe 10 to 20% of our time traveling. Once a month, one of us within the team is probably in a different country, dependent on the needs of that local market. Spending time and then sharing that information back. But yeah, travel is a really important factor of getting to know the people in the business.
And just out of curiosity, when you're on the ground with that local market, what does your time there usually entail? How is that time best spent in terms of being able to have face time with them?
It's varied, honestly, over the years. For quite a long time, we ran growth hacking sessions. So like I said, we'd hired people for their expertise. So we would kind of, drop them into the local market, put an hour or 2 hours into people's diaries and have, what we describe as growth hacking, but presenting to them, we've looked at your business. Have you thought about this? We would consider this. This is how we could improve. Things starting simple with things like doing an audit of the retailers we work with and being able to kind of, their takeaway is a very clear, detailed action plan that they can go away and action. And that's very much agreed in the session. But then recently, we're in the middle of a company transformation. So for us, it's getting to know the category visions, the category plans, which we can then take back and turn into digital commerce activation. So honestly, depending on where the business is at, it's a bit of push and pull from both sides. But very much kind of spending time together, focusing on the key topics that have come up. I probably should mention we as a team, we connect with each of our top 15 markets once a month. So we have that regular FaceTime in the diary. So you're well aware of the country priorities. And then when we go to visit the teams, it's very much a fruition of those conversations we've been having previously.
And just to shift gears slightly from, I guess, thinking about, the way that you operate within Barilla to kind of getting now your expertise when it comes to total industry, how do you see the retail landscape? Given, like you said, that you're visiting and you're engaging with these top 15 markets and even more generally with 35 plus markets on a regular basis, how do you see that retail landscape globally evolving?
If I look at digital commerce specifically around the world today, we can see in some evolved categories, it's representative of upwards of 50% of shopper spend. And that's really exciting. So if I think about grocery, in some of our top customers around the world, we're at 28% of our business is through the digital commerce channel, so around 30%. But we can see that it's only going to continue to grow, and it is scaling and maturing. And I think when I started in digital commerce 7 years ago, it felt like the new and upcoming thing, but I still get that sense in my role today. So it's not something that I think was kind of has come and gone. And if I look at some of the grocery forecasts from the likes of IGD or Flywheel, you see in the next 5 years, traditional retail in decline and e-commerce in growth. So, as sitting within this space, we are a major growth opportunity. The goalpost is continually changing. Capabilities are regularly and rapidly changing. And it's quite exciting to not know what's around the corner, but we know we're getting closer to the demands of the shoppers. I think, obviously, that's looking at the growth, looking at the industry through a growth lens. I think the other thing that I'm observing and looking forward to is the 360-degree planning between the different teams and very much having a category vision and translating that into the needs of the shopper, no matter what the channel. We're edging closer to that as a business. And I remember in one of my previous jobs, we were on a retailer website and we saw a banner and everyone was asking the question, who did that? Where did that come from? And it was from a shopper marketing team that, you weren't aware of that initiative happening. And I think those days are long gone.
And speaking of things that have changed as well since you started your career, has been retail media, which has made obviously a boom in the last 3 years. What impact has that had on your role?
Yeah, I worked in retail media at the start of my career, which we joked about, but I didn't really realize it was retail media at the time. It felt so working with Amazon was really, again, an invaluable experience that I just didn't realize I was having at the time.
You did?
In the past 18 months, I've recently taken on a project at Barilla to look at retail media, but look at it in partnership with our data, media, and shopper marketing teams. I think what we found was that retail media was fallen into the hands of the e-commerce managers around the world because it was only considered to be the job of the e-commerce person. But together with those functions I just mentioned, we've worked hard to understand and help the company understand that this doesn't just sit with one team and it is very much a joint effort. And, we even started off simple, just looking at our accounting with finance. We didn't know how much we were spending in retail media because there wasn't one way to measure it. It sat within different lines of the P&L, and it was really confusing as to what we did consider retail media. So we started at the basics and, we're still very much working on that together with finance, but we're now able to measure retail media spend. And we spent a lot of time educating people on what that is. And I think now we're in a position where we're able to start looking at activations and what does that look like and what does the right approach mean. and sat within my role, it was very much facilitating these conversations and recognizing that for us, retail media in e-commerce is on-site and off-site and in-store, very much sits within a different team, but we need to be coordinated with that approach.
And just out of curiosity, so you mentioned partnering with finance, which I think is just spot on. I mean, I think anytime, particularly from a spend standpoint, when you're trying to figure out trade investment or trade spend, having somebody from the finance team be part of that conversation makes all the sense in the world. I'm curious, how have you partnered with marketing or with your commercial shopper teams on that as well, on that journey?
Yeah, they've been a huge part of this. So shopper marketing's been really our bridge towards the traditional marketing function, I would say. But what we want to aim towards is delivering the same brand message no matter where the shopper is. And that partnership with marketing and shopper marketing is really crucial to that. I can talk about, I guess, here the evolution of a role within our global team. We have an e-commerce content manager, and their role was really to activate, excellent PDP content in every market around the world. And that role, has existed for the past 4 years and has very much been around creation and deployment. Now we've got ourselves into a really good position. That role is evolving to include retail media content, of course, for the on-site piece. But that means they're now in part of conversations, looking at brand toolkits, looking at NPDs, and really thinking about how we translate traditional marketing campaigns into the e-commerce world. And again, that connection is really important for us. And that's traditionally a function, I would say 4 years ago, we weren't connected with the marketing department the way we are today. And that's really just helping push us in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that the retail media, as much as sometimes it does feel like a bubble, there's no question that it has really changed the way that retailers and brands have had to work internally. So, Nicole, I'm curious to know about your personal leadership or career journey. How has it been for you personally to have this career where quite rapidly you've grown and you've taken added responsibility, which means budget, P&L, people management, more exposure to senior people. How have you coped?
I've really tried to stay grounded in the fact that others trust me and trust me with the increased responsibility. So it's really important to trust myself and really think about, it's not always about proving yourself, but about learning on the go and developing your capabilities and experiences. A very wise person once told me, if you're comfortable, you're not growing. And of course, the counter to that is if you're uncomfortable, you are growing. And I think in those challenging moments, I honestly often remind myself of that quote because it is true. And, increasing your responsibility can increase the levels of uncomfortableness. But I've really tried to stay grounded in the fact that, these opportunities are given to me, or I'm putting myself forward for them. And, that there is a level of trust there that I need to rely on.
How's it been to take on, I think that this is a huge milestone for somebody's career, and the kind of the earlier you do it, the better to start managing, hiring people.
Yeah, I would say I'm empowered by the people around me, and I'm very fortunate to have a network of people internally and externally that I can discuss these topics with, and for me that's really important to just continue to build that.
And I'm assuming here, but I'm guessing that in several of these team dynamics, you're usually one of the younger people in the room. How has that been? And what advice can you share with other people who are in similar situations?
I used to be the youngest person in the room, and then comes people from Nicole that are several years younger than me, and it's been a I don't know, close to traumatic for me.
What advice can you share with those people, like Daniel and others who are in those
Advice would you give my
situations?
younger self?
When you are one of the younger people in the room, and you want to make sure that your voice is heard and as you said, respected.
Yeah, I think my advice probably goes not to the younger people in the room, but to, the people surrounding them. And it's all around empowering those people. Like I feel very fortunate at Barilla that I have a manager that does really empower me and the rest of the team. That they very much put us at the forefront. They're putting us within the presentations where it would be quite typical for the lead of the team to be present. And I think it's all around psychological safety and making people feel comfortable, but also being comfortable to, not be perfect and not get everything right. And I think working in e-commerce is that unique opportunity that no one does always know the answer. It's the reason I still work in e-commerce is I like the kind of learning on the fly and figuring it out together. So I think the empowerment of putting people within those positions if they're comfortable and seeing how it goes is really important. But also working within this space, it kind of gives you the opportunity to learn because there isn't such a definitive answer out there. If I think about marketing, I've never worked in a traditional marketing role, but working with those colleagues, I know there's literature offered and referenced around how brands grow, and it's very factual around what that role looks like. I think e-commerce, I don't think there's any literature wrote about these opportunities. So it's being a younger person in the industry. It gives you the chance to figure that out together.
Yeah. And do you think that maybe for you personally as well, do you see yourself or your peers with the possibility of becoming CEO in the future, even if like e-com or digital is a smaller percentage of the business?
I think it's really important, even if not at a CEO level, that the C-suite is developing to include these digital and commerce capabilities. For example, I saw Mars recently, their chief digital commerce officer was promoted to chief digital commerce and customer, like a CCO.
Hi, Neil.
A sales officer.
He listens to the podcast.
And that's okay. That's really interesting. So the CEO, really values and considers the opinion of people within the digital realm. So I would like to think so, and I would like to think that the people with these experiences, if we see that the industry, the growth is driving retail from a digital commerce perspective, it needs to be part of that leadership team.
So shifting gears slightly and kind of going back to getting your viewpoint, as somebody who is almost in essence, let's say, grown up professionally in in digital, is there any piece of emerging technology that's out there that you're getting really excited about in terms of like what the future holds for it?
Yeah, Daniel, I think you mentioned how do you fit it all in? So the emerging tech I'm excited about is quite simple, but it's automation for everyday tasks. It's working in e-commerce. There's always 100 things you can do, and you need to choose the 2 to 3 things that you want to focus on or you need to focus on. So, but that automation and that ability to reduce time spent on repetitive tasks, I'm personally really excited about. I love when Copilot, I don't have to write a email. I just tell it what I want it to write, and it writes it for me. That's instantly 10, 15 minutes often, shaved off my day. So that's kind of what I'm personally excited about from a productivity standpoint. There's a partner we work with called Dragonfly AI, which I find really, really interesting. The ability to mimic shoppers' eyes on banners, product images. We've even started to use it for new product packaging. So being able to see clarity tests, understand, what it looks like on the physical, digital shelf, but within minutes. Again, it's something that we either didn't do before or we had to wait, days or weeks for someone to pull that together for us. So I think my answer is centralized around time saving, but I think when I look at the emerging technology, that's the thing that, from a personal standpoint, I'm quite excited to incorporate into my day-to-day life.
Anything that saves you time and will let you look after the multiple responsibilities you have. So Nicole, this wouldn't be a regular FMCG Guys episode without our famous last question, which is, with everything that you've learned so far, because you have a few learnings left, I guess, in your career, what's the one piece of advice you would give yourself if you were to start again?
I think no one's expecting you to know it all, and it's okay to not know the answer. I remember starting at Barilla, I was asked around a piece of work and I was too afraid to say I'd never seen that type of report before, because I thought it was expected of me at a certain level to be aware of that. So it probably took me 6 months, to even get familiar with that work stream. When I look back now, it would have been perfectly fine for me to stand up and ask that question. But also, I think having fun with it. If I look back to the team I was surrounded with in my early days as a grad, and the enjoyment I had from just starting out, those are often the days I like to look back on. So it's very much around having fun and making the most of it, because again, I would never have thought I would have been here at Barilla 5 to 7 years ago, and who knows where I'll be in the next 5 to 7 years. But it's just important to make the most of what you've got today.
This was Nicole Pilkington, Global Head of eCommerce Activation at Barilla. Ephraim, what are your takeaways?
Well, it's always interesting to speak with somebody, one who has, in essence, grown up in digital commerce over her career, his or her career, and just to get their point of view in terms of like how they see that space relative to, let's say, more traditional marketing or commercial. The other thing for me, I think it's really interesting, is just her viewpoint as somebody who has run that gamut of like working in a local role, working in a regional role, and then ultimately working in a global role. And what I took away from that specifically was when she said, what served her really well is that given that experience, she can serve as that voice of the local market, even, consistently in a global role, right? Which is like where you've been there, you've lived that role, some of the practicalities of it, and you're able to kind of apply those as you're developing global materials, I think is invaluable.
Totally. I just thought it was very interesting, like her role, the title, Head of Global E-commerce Acceleration, could mean so many things. And it does actually mean so many things, because like she's just got so many different responsibilities that she's picked up. But it just goes to show, like, if you're capable and ambitious, and I think that also if you're humble and willing to learn in this space, it's really like a way to like accelerate and superpower your career and get many different experiences that you wouldn't get in other functions where your scope would be much narrower.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to hear her specifically talk about her experience with retail media and what she specifically has worked on in terms of, one, getting her Barilla's hands around spend and how much it is, but before that, even ultimately figuring out how to measure it, I think in working with her finance team is really interesting. And then from there, being able to then think about, okay, well, then what do we do? What's best in class activation look like when it comes to retail media? I think it's fascinating because obviously it's such a huge topic. Being able to kind of then say, this is how we've kind of in essence taking it. And I think she even mentioned it this way as something that typically only resided with an e-com team and being able to say, no, actually retail media is something that we all, there's a lot of other functions that play a role in that, whether that be brand marketing, shopper marketing, sales, it impacts so many other functions beyond just e-com.
Yeah.
That way.
I also liked how she talked about her career growth, her journey, and talking about the importance of trust. No, like really, I think that if you're managing someone, you have to give them trust, give them that space to make mistakes and learn, and really like have their back, right? And don't make them feel like they need to prove themselves all the time. And as she said, if I've been promoted or hired for a reason, right? And start from there.
Well, and I think, it's fascinating to hear her talk about that the reason that has happened has been because the people around her, the people that she's worked with, they built that mutual trust with one another. And then she's being put into a situation where she is allowed to, ask questions, but also be able to learn and contribute, right? I mean, I think, and you and I have talked about on other podcasts where there's this reverse mentoring that I think is fascinating. People who are further along in their career and what they can learn from people who are younger in that regard, right? Around things like retail media and just digital commerce in general.
Yeah. This reverse mentoring thing, I wonder if I remember it was like kind of a thing a while ago. I don't know if it's still happening that much.
I think, well, I can't speak to it in terms of like, as a total industry from an FMCG perspective, but I think my sense is that there are individuals at different companies who just have that curiosity and then they just want to learn, right? So they're almost like doing it almost like in an ad hoc or an individual basis. But I imagine there must be companies out there, and it'd be interesting for us to ask our audience and our future guests, like, if they're looking at that as well.
Yeah, totally. We'll have to write it down. It's a good idea.
I'll just tell you this one quick anecdote, which is like for us at Diageo, we had a session just this week where our data and technology team and some of the, let's say, the more young or the digitally native people on our team made us go through an AI case study where we actually used our internal AI tools to be able to create a new product, marketing campaign, business plan in 30 minutes using our AI tools. And for a lot of us, I mean, I think, just being able to like do that and like recognize like, oh, we can write answer all those questions. It's interesting. I mean, we loved it, right? And I think the more of those kinds of things we can do, the better.
No, and it's great for one part, and it's great for the others who also feel like, goodness, I'm already making an impact, and I'm an analyst or whatever, and I'm like have like a VP or a director that's like learning useful things from me. So I think that's something that should be definitely done. Cool, Efrain. We'll look forward to seeing you in a few days here in Barcelona. Very excited.
Yeah, likewise. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, if you can guarantee sunny weather and no rain, I would greatly appreciate it.
I'll try. Excellent. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG, guys.